Ukrainian and Russian negotiators agreed to a prisoner swap Friday in their first direct talks in more than 3 years. President Trump says that he plans to sit down with Putin as soon as possible. Steve Harrigan has all of these details from Istanbul. Steve, good morning.
Molly, certainly one big step forward that the two sides were in the same room for the first time in more than 3 years talking about peace. They did manage to agree on a prisoner swap of 1,000 prisoners on each side, but no major moves forward towards peace. That's in large part because the key players were not involved directly in these talks. No Vladimir Putin, no Zelensky from Ukraine, and of course no President Trump either, although Trump said there's probably not going to be any major progress on peace talks until he meets directly with Russian President Vladimir Putin. That sentiment echoed by the U.S. Secretary of State, Marco Rubio.
I think it's abundantly clear that the only way we're going to have a breakthrough here is between President Trump and President Putin.
At this point, the two sides remain very far apart. Ukraine is pushing for a 30-day ceasefire. They say if Russia does not agree to a ceasefire, they're calling for the U.S. and Europe to ramp up economic sanctions against Russia. Russia, for its part, wants complete control over 4 territories in eastern Ukraine. That includes some land that Russia does not even control after the fighting is yet. Ukraine is saying Russia's demands are, quote, divorced from reality. Molly, back to you.
All right, Steve Harrigan, thank you. So is there hope on the horizon for a peace deal? National security and military analyst Dr. Rebecca Grant joins me now. Thank you for giving us your time on this Saturday morning. I want to get your thoughts. Steve Harrigan set us up nicely there, talking about how these key leaders, Trump, Putin, Zelensky, did not attend, but they're talking. Are we getting any closer to peace for Ukraine and Russia?
Well, I was glad to see the meeting, but I got to be honest with you. This meeting was one big fat zero. The Russians walked in and said, we're happy to fight for years, and by the way, you've got to give us Kharkiv and more land. You know what Rubio really did, though, was meet with NATO and get NATO members to agree to spend maybe up to 5%. So the stage is now set for a Trump-Putin meeting. It is going to take that to get a genuine ceasefire.
And that is what the president has expressed, he believes. Marco Rubio, as the Secretary of State, has also said the same thing, that we're to have a breakthrough here until President Trump and President Putin meet in person. Do you think that meeting is close? Are we talking weeks away? It seems like the sides are somewhat expressing a willingness to get together.
Who knows? I wouldn't be surprised to see a meeting perhaps this summer. There are 3 big factors here. One, China still continues to support Russia. Putin likes the war. He's got his economy on a wartime footing. But here's the real one. Behind the scenes, what kind of economic and commercial incentives can the U.S. put together to try to lure Putin into a ceasefire? I think that's what Russia's envoy and our Steve Witkoff and others are really working on, is looking at some type of economic or sanctions relief that will make Putin say yes to a ceasefire.
Right, the big stick. Defense Secretary Robert Gates was on Face the Nation today, and he talked about his views on Putin's ideology. You touched on it a little bit, but he said that he believes that Putin feels that he has a destiny to recreate the Russian Empire. So is there anything that can deter that if peace is not your goal, and he has a whole other goal potentially?
Yeah, you know, Putin is just a nutcase on this subject. But I tell you this, he's had some big losses. He's lost his imperial overreach in Syria. His activities in Africa are under pressure. But as long as China is kind of giving him the blank checkbook with the energy sales, he persists in this idea. But this is exactly what's so tricky for Putin. It's all about imperial Russia, all that nonsense about NATO. So NATO has to hold very firm, as they are, to get good European security. And then there's got to be some deal that Trump has to come up with that Putin will accept. And Ukraine has to be secured. And, you know, Putin's really lost in Ukraine. That U.S. minerals deal, our security guarantees. He is never going to have the victory in Ukraine that he sought. But now we need a ceasefire and a way to get Putin down from his tree.
Yeah, well, you know, you've brought us into our next topic here. President Trump says the U.S. is very close to making a nuclear deal with Iran after delivering a proposal to that nation. The president saying, Iran wants to trade with us, okay? If you can believe that, and I'm okay with it. That's what he said to Bret Baier in this phenomenal interview earlier this week. Your thoughts on if a deal is in sight in Iran.
Yes, it's getting real, and credit the U.S. military, aircraft carriers, bombers for pointing that military power at Iran and scaring them into talking. So the deal is, as Trump says, Iran gives up the nuclear dust and gets commercial incentives in return. And I'm telling you, Iran looked at Syria getting the sanctions lifted, and boy, were they jealous. So the Ayatollahs have to take this deal proposal that's on the table, or their nuclear facilities will be targeted, whether it's limited military strikes, cyber, or whatnot. As Trump says, you can do it nice or not so nice. That military power and those options remain in place. But I think it's getting real. I think that Trump will get an Iran nuclear deal here, maybe before too long.
Yeah, a great point there about just how clear the president has been about the repercussions if they don't get to a deal and this goes in the wrong direction. One final thing, the foreign minister there in Iran pushed back on this idea that there was actually a written proposal. Do you think that's just a messaging thing that the Iranians are using?
Yes, because that same foreign minister went off and begged the Iraqis to beg the other Arab states to beg the U.S. to get sanctions lifted. They are very worried. They know that they are risking regime instability. If there is a strike on the nuclear plant, their economy is terrible. Iran is running out of room to get this deal done. We know they will never have a nuclear weapon. Got to be good inspections. It's going to be tricky, but Iran is out of time to make a good deal.
And President Trump's trip this week signaled, there are big things happening in the Middle East, and do they not want to be a part of it, I guess is the big question. Dr. Rebecca Grant, thank you very much. We greatly appreciate you and appreciate your thoughts on this Saturday morning.
I'm Steve Ducey.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.